We call this meeting to order. If you could please rise and pay attention to Councilwoman Nager for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. We can't hear her, she's talking. Not yet, Hannah. We can't hear you. Talk? Nope, still nothing. I'm sorry.
She's pushing buttons. We'll see what happens here. Sorry about that.
We had that problem in the committee meeting yesterday, and it came rushing in and plugged in the speaker.
And I know they ran a drill.
It took Ronaldo to plug in the speaker at our committee meeting. And then there was feedback. We got it fixed.
Hey, worst case scenario, say something because I think they're checking the microphone. Okay, and call, do you have the cell phone of the person that's going to be on?
Here comes Gretchen.
Okay, so maybe you could just call them, introduce them, and I'll put you on the
Maybe.
microphone. See how that works. All right.
You can be here next time. Ronaldo. Start of the meeting. It's too far away.
We had these every Tuesday night.
Well, they were redoing some of the stuff because we were the first users in the ECR, so maybe they've been updating some.
No, it's fine.
We got room over here, and your name tag was here anyway.
That's true, that might be good.
He's up next to me.
You can't keep me quiet.
You're loud enough.
Never. That's right, I'll just yell. They'll still hear me at home.
It would be rule breaking to see out of order. I
Yeah,
realized it was built in.
can we see if we can hear Ortiz?
I can hear you through the phone. I cannot hear you.
They were asking to have Sylvia try and talk.
Okay. Let me see.
Am I good to go?
There we go.
She's on my phone. You have to mute yourself on your computer.
I muted the computer. Chris, can you also mute yourself on your computer?
She's muted on the computer.
Mute yourself and turn off the volume.
Try that.
Hannah, I think that the counselor, there we go. Right now?
Okay,
How's this?
at least we can hear you perfectly while they solve the issue. So Hannah, if you can
Excellent.
make your introduction.
Absolutely.
You need to mute your computer, like the sound completely, so in the computer it doesn't come out and it's only coming through the phone.
Yeah, I could be muted on the computer. Am I better out here?
You're still providing feedback.
They need to mute their computer. The city of Topeka admin needs to mute their computer.
Take 5 minutes and then.
Yeah, okay, we tried to fix this with the good old phone trick. Why don't we pause this and then re-engage in 5 minutes while this is solved? Thank you, guys. Okay, for now, we're gonna enter into a recess. We'll be back soon.
Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you very much for your patience. As I indicated earlier, we are having some issues with technology. At this point in time, if you could please rise if you're able to pay attention to the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear God, thank you so much for this evening. God, grant us grace and patience with each other as we traverse the difficulties. Let us come together tonight as we are making decisions on behalf of our community. Thank you so much for the gift of the people that we get the honor to represent. Lord, lead us and guide us. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We proceed with the roll call. Michelle?
Mayor De La Isla,
Here.
Council Members Hiller,
Here.
Valdivia Acala, Ortiz,
Here.
Emerson,
Here.
Padilla,
Here.
Nager, Dobler,
Here.
Duncan,
Here.
and Lesser.
Here.
We have 8 present.
Being present, we have quorum. We now proceed to the appointments, if the clerk would read.
Item 2A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Frank Burnham to the Topeka Public Building Commission for a term ending November 15th, 2025.
We have heard the item. The mayor does not vote on this. What is the pleasure of the governing body on the appointment?
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval by Councilman Emerson, second by Mayor-elect. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Council Members Lesser,
Yes. Yes.
Hiller. Yes. Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
We have 7 voting yes.
7 voting yes, the motion carries. Mr. Burnham is here. If you could please stand. Thank you so much for your grace with us this evening. You got to see your city in action and hang out with us. We appreciate your service to our community. Thank you so much. All right. So there are, before we get any further, there are going to be some changes to the agenda. Legal, would it be adequate for us to approve the change to the agenda? Okay, so the changes to the agenda that are being proposed this evening are as follow. Removal of item 3, which is the presentation. Then further removal on item 6 of the Citizen Advisory Council. Removal as well of the item that is the discussion regarding the grant awards, which would only leave us with 2 items for non-action items, which would be discussion of the resolution of intent as well as the legislative agenda.
There is an item
ARPA.
We can
Do we want to do ARPA tonight?
shift that to next week.
We'll shift it to the next meeting. Okay, so, and also removal of item F, ARPA. So with that proposal, is there a motion? Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Comments or discussion about amending the agenda? Councilman Lesser.
What do we have?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. What do we have for executive session? Do we have?
We have 1 executive session this evening.
I would like to make a motion for a second executive session.
So we'll add that, even though that's not part of the agenda, we'll add it to the discussion this evening as well, sir.
Thank you.
We'll work with legal so that the parameters are public as well.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we have the amended agenda in front of us. We have a motion and we have a second. At this point in time, if there's no questions, we proceed with the roll call vote.
Is Christina
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 voting yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion carries. At this point in time, we move on to the consent agenda.
Item 4A is approval of a utilities contract between the City of Topeka and A.W. Schultz, Inc. in the amount of $613,660 to provide electrical control system design, construction, and installation for SCADA pump station programmable logic controller upgrades, Project T-291097.01. Item B is ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Traub allowing and approving city expenditures for the period August 28, 2021 through September 24, 2021, and enumerating said expenditures therein. Item C are the minutes of the regular meeting of October 19, 2021, and there are no applications.
We have heard the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of the body? Councilwoman Nager moves approval. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Councilwoman Ortiz seconds the motion. Do we have discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing no discussion, we proceed with the vote.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes. Yes.
Ortiz. Thank you. Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
and Mayor De La Isla.
Yes.
We have 9 voting yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion carries. At this point in time, I would like to do a really quick pause and ask if there is a way of including Councilwoman Valdivia for the rest of the discussion over the phone like you were intending, Gretchen?
Yeah, I do not have her number, but I can give you my phone and.
And just put it there so that way she could,
Hello, we're going to put you on speakerphone now.
all right, we move on to the action items. The first action item, if the clerk would read.
Action item 5A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Traub pertaining to an amendment to the text and map of the Topeka Comprehensive Plan for the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Bryson Risley presented last week on the attached plan, and staff recommends approval of this. And Bryson, is there any additional comments you want to make tonight? So this plan was presented, and I know there are a couple, I believe, here from the community.
All right, comments or questions with regards to this item? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the governing body? We have a motion for approval by Councilman Nager. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Emerson. Comments or questions on the item?
Do we have public comment on this, Mayor?
You think they left?
Oh, George Meyer?
Oh, I don't know.
That's for Flywheel.
Oh, okay.
But Susan was here.
Yeah, there was supposed to, Ms.
Susan?
Flaherty?
Right.
No, it's not here.
She might have misunderstood about which ones we
Yeah,
took
we
off.
were gonna, and then do we have Mr. Meyer?
George is speaking on the flywheel item, which is 6A.
Okay. All right. There is no individuals to sign up to speak on this item. We have a motion and we have a second. What is the pleasure of the governing, at this point in time, we proceed by voting.
Council,
Christina would be first.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala is here and she's listening.
yes, Mayor. Councilmembers Ortiz? Yes. Emerson?
Yes.
Padilla?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Lesser? Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Councilmember Hiller?
Yes.
And Valdivia Alcala?
Yes.
We have 10 voting yes.
10 having voted yes, the motion carries. At this point in time, we move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
Item B is approval of a utilities contract amendment between the City of Topeka and Bartlett and West, Inc. in the amount of $1,419,738 to amend and add design services and construction manager at risk selection and coordination for the North Topeka nutrient removal project T-291106.00.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The attached documents are for approval of a consultant contract over $50,000. This would normally go on the consent agenda, as we had another additional item tonight that was approved under the consent agenda item. But due to the size of the contract and the expected changes for the overall project budget, I placed it on the agenda tonight as an action item. Braxton Copley, Utilities Director, is here tonight and will go walk through the details of the project and the request. Braxton?
Thank you, Brent. Good evening, Council. We're going to talk about the North Topeka wastewater treatment plant nutrient removal. And the reason why we're here is because the EPA, acting through KDHE, has given us a new permit for our North Topeka wastewater treatment plant. And this new permit has nutrient removal requirements, and they're pretty significant. So nitrogen, we have a goal under our permit of 10 milligrams per liter. You can see, and that's the dotted red line down at the bottom. The green line up at the top is where we are right now, which is a concentration of approximately 40 milligrams per liter. So we have a significant amount of nitrogen. Now, this truly is a goal, but in the EPA and KDHE's world, goals quickly become permit requirements in the next permit cycle or two. So we thought it was going to be much more effective for us to target both nitrogen and phosphorus as part of this project, as opposed to just doing phosphorus now, and then 3 years from now, when our next permit comes out, having to do more substantial improvements and possibly interfering with the phosphorus removal. So we designed this project to be able to handle both nitrogen and phosphorus. Moving over to phosphorus, we have a bigger challenge in front of us because we're right now at 400 pounds per day, and we have a hard limit of 100 pounds per day in terms of what we need to remove. So to achieve this, we came up with a four-part plan. First of all was initial plan, doing a study in terms of getting our arms around what we had, as well as looking at the options that were available. Second phase is the actual design and construction. Third phase is completion of construction, which under our permit has to be done by December 31st of 2023. And then the fourth phase is the actual permit compliance, because we know that we're going to be tweaking things after we come in with new technology, and we basically have a year to basically right-size it, make the tweaks so that we are in compliance with our permit. Technology's great when it works. There we go. IT gods are frowning on all of us tonight. So what we did was and only half of the slide is showing, so we'll oh, here we go. Wow. All right. So back in June of 2020, we put an RFP out on the street to basically select a consultant, and it was a joint team of Black and Beach and Bartlett and West that we selected to do this. First phase of it, which was a $171,000 contract, was basically to study what we had, verify our nutrient limits, look at what our waste stream was coming in, look at the 4 or 5 different technologies that are available, and then basically make a recommendation. So that's where we are right now. This preliminary study has been done, recommendation has been made, and we have an estimate for doing our design services of $1.4 million. So the budget authority that we have right now for this project is $6.3 million that was approved as part of 2021. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm asking for an amendment that falls within my existing budget authority. Part of what we're doing is this 1.4 is going to pay for the design. Full disclosure, 2 years from now, I'm going to be back in front of you asking for another $1 million approximately to cover the construction administration services, but I just want to cover the design tonight. Okay, then the other thing that we're going to do is to help us achieve our permit requirements in terms of completion by 2023 and full permit compliance by 2024, is we want to slightly tweak what we're doing. Instead of doing a classic design, bid, build, we want to do a design build process where we will bring a construction manager at risk on board so that we have them to contribute during the design process. This allows for better bidding. It allows for better constructability in terms of the contractors actually having a material say on what we're doing, and it also reduces the construction schedule. So 2 parts of this: design, what we need to get the design so we get it out on the street on bid, as well as to assist us with selection of a construction manager at risk. The only other point I'll make on the construction manager at risk is we will ultimately negotiate a contract that will be a guaranteed maximum price. So the construction manager at risk will be liable for any overages that exceed that guaranteed maximum price. So as part of this design bid process. So where are we overall in terms of the project? As part of the 2021 CIB, we had a $6.3 million project for nutrient removal for North Topeka. That $6.3 million, unfortunately, is woefully short of what we need. So it's never a fun thing to basically stand up in front of you and say, we blew it. We used a 10-year-old estimate for that construction price. It's questionable whether the technology that was outlined in that 2012 study at that $6.3 million would be sufficient to actually achieve the nutrient removal limits that we have. So I'm here. We missed it. We blew it. We'll admit our mistake and learn from that. But as part of the 2023 CIP that we will be coming to you in March, we will be asking for an increase of approximately $11 million, $10.8 million, to cover what we now have is a good construction cost estimate based on what we've selected for the technology as well as on the preliminary design. So full disclosure, I will be back as part of the CIP basically saying we do need to amend the CIP project to cover the total project cost. So again, this is not an optional project. This is mandated by EPA and KDHE that we have the nutrient removal. So that's the sum tonight. I'm asking for authority for $1.4 million to increase the project, increase my contract to get the design done, get a construction manager at risk involved, and then I will be back in the spring to basically ask to increase the project budget for the overall project budget. So with that, I'll gladly stand for any questions that you have.
Questions for Braxton? I do know that Councilwoman Valdivia wanted to have the floor. Councilwoman Valdivia, the floor is yours. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala?
Thank you, Mayor. I listened to the presentation of Braxton's and I had looked over it as well. And this is something I believe that needs to be done. So I don't know if there's going to be further discussion or not. If not, I would, if there's a vote on this, which it looks like, I would move to approve.
We have a motion for approval. We have a second. Oh, no. Okay. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second so that we could have discussion? Second. Okay, motion for approval by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, seconded by Councilman Lesser. Questions by Councilman Dobler.
Just a comment, I will be abstaining on this vote since Bartlett and West is involved in this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilman Duncan.
Yeah, I gotta move over here. All right. Keep it exciting tonight. Okay, so this isn't actually directed at you. My first comment is I'm supportive of the project. I understand we need to get it done. Like anything, it's how we get there, right? My first comment is not really directed at you, Braxton. A little frustration. I sat in this chair during the last CIP discussion and said, when was the last time we updated all of our bid processes, and do we have any that are 8 to 10 years old? And I know the answer was, no, we've pretty much updated everything to within 5 or 6 years. Again, not dragging towards you, but a little frustrated that clearly was not a 100% accurate response. So I would suggest that maybe we could go back through now and start looking at things that are other projects that might be 10 years old and moving that so we're not hit with a little bit of sticker shock. I do want to confirm it's 1.4 tonight. It's 10.8 probably in 2023, but somewhere in there is another $1 million. Correct? That's not included in that 10.8?
That's included. The additional $1 million has already been factored into the total project cost of the $17.1 million that we will be seeking to increase from 6.3 to that. So that additional $1 million is factored into that.
And none of that 10.8 million right now is in any of our CIP. So in the next 2 years, we'll have to figure out bonding and the impact of that and all that.
We are currently developing our CIP to present to you in the spring. And obviously, we are going to have to figure out what projects get pushed, what programs get cut to be able to fund this.
Well, and we won't get into the weeds of it tonight. I think this project might qualify for some creativity on our part if we think it's going to impact our bonding. You know, we have the authority to create things like a public building commission. No one can freak out too early, but under state law, that may allow us if we think this is going to impact our ratings or other things. So I'd like to have some of those conversations at some point to see if there's a creative way to get us there without hitting us too hard in the long run. I guess my last question is, I want to make sure that the construction manager is the final contractor on this project?
The construction manager at risk will be the contractor, and that will be selected through this RFP process so that we can then incorporate them into the design team.
Okay.
So typically, the contractor would be selected just purely based on low bid. Going this route of construction manager at risk, qualifications now become a factor so that I'm not just going with someone who put together the low bid who may not have done this before. I can actually be looking at, okay, who's out there nationwide that has expertise in this technology and who has done these before and is going to actually be a meaningful part of my team and make contributions and say to the engineers, wait a minute, have you thought about doing it this way? Because I can save you $200,000 if we do it this way as opposed to that way. So
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to clarify, make sure, okay, so this RFP will cover that phase of it.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, sir.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Braxton. I might be completely erroneous, but is there any way that the infrastructure bill that was signed at the federal level would play into funding these improvements in this project?
It's a potential.
Okay.
We virtually know nothing in terms of the details relative to what those projects can be available for, as well as what the funding mechanism is going to be. Is it going to be through a revolving state loan fund that we're competing with other municipalities on, that we would possibly have to come up with bond insurance, so we'd have a different amortization? We really don't know.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for Braxton? Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess along the lines of Councilwoman Nager's question and the concern raised about the money, we will be looking at even ARPA money as well as infrastructure money to offset some dollars that we already expected to have to spend utility money or revenue bonds on, right? So we do have a chance to look at, I mean, everything's important, but
Absolutely. I believe that tonight the motion was made to defer the ARPA discussion for utilities and potential projects till next week.
understand about that. But nonetheless, as you all, I'm hopeful that we'll just, I guess, related to all that, that we could identify if we have a priority for at least X amount of ARPA money so that the staff can work on their CIP submissions in a timely manner. So I know it's all up in the air, having the infrastructure bill, I find comforting. At least we can start looking at something that's solid that's coming in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Copley, thanks for being here tonight, and I know as much as you hate coming to tell us 11 million, obviously we all hate that. On the other hand, I appreciate that you guys are looking forward, adding something here that's, like you said, probably going to be regulated very soon. So I appreciate your foresight there, and the county's had a lot of luck with these type of contracts, so I'm very supportive of doing that to get this done, make sure we meet the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion, we have a second, we've had ample discussion. I don't want to rush the discussion. We don't have anybody signed up to speak on this item. So if there's no further discussion, we proceed with a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Abstain.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
and Ortiz.
Yes.
We have 9 voting yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion carries. We now move on into the non-action items. Non-action item A, if the clerk would read.
Item A is a discussion concerning a resolution of intent authorizing the issuance of industrial revenue bonds in the amount of $10 million to facilitate the acquisition and renovation of the former Topeka Holodome located at 605 Southwest Fairlawn Avenue, Topeka, Kansas.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight, we're here to discuss the possibility of a development project on the west side of town. Flywheel Fairlawn LAC is requesting the city issue industrial revenue bonds to facilitate its acquisition and renovation of the former Topeka Holodome to use as workforce rental housing with approximately 140 units of multifamily housing. So the question, there will be a hearing and then a question for the governing body to vote on next week to decide if the city should issue the IRBs, which will allow the property to be exempt from property taxes for the next 10 years. A representative of the company, George Meyer, is here tonight also to discuss and answer questions regarding this project.
All right. So what is the, would the governing body like to ask any questions of City Manager at this point in time? Or would you like to hear from Mr. Meyer? Mr. Meyer, could you please come to the podium?
Hello, thanks for having me tonight, council members and mayor.
Mr. Meyer, can I ask you for a favor? Since we have a council person that's on the phone, if you could speak into
Little
the
closer.
mic, that would help us a
Okay.
lot. Thank you.
My name is George Meyer. I'm with Flywheel Capital. We're based in Denver. We are the owners of 605 Southwest Fairlawn. It's the old Ramada Holodome. We've owned it since about December of 2018. We are in the works of redeveloping the property from a dark hotel into workforce housing. We're really excited about the project, and I'm here to ask your consideration on the IRB. Essentially, what we are planning is a conversion of the hotel into studios, 1 beds and 2 beds in the existing hotel rooms. We're adding amenity space where the restaurant was, and fitness centers and office areas. The total project, like Brent said, will be around 150 units. The total project cost is about $10.5 million, with about $5.5 million in hard construction costs. Our goal for the project, with it being workforce housing, is right now we have about a weighted average of rents about $670 a month per unit. This lines up with the findings from the Topeka housing study that was completed in July of 2020. We are working with SDG, which is a local architect group in Topeka. We are essentially permit ready. We have a lender lined up, and our goal is to begin construction on the project kind of mid-January. The construction timeline will be approximately 9 months, and then we can start leasing up the property. So that's an overview. I'm asking for your consideration on the approval of the IRB, and I'm here to answer any questions on the project.
Just a reminder for the governing body, this is a discussion item. It is not for vote this evening. It's just to introduce it so that we could bring it for a vote in the next meeting. At this point in time, are there any questions on this item? Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Concerning the term workforce living, what sort of leasers are you looking at housing in this building?
I think our focus kind of lines up with the housing study, so,
Okay.
you know, different groups that may be working in warehouses or construction jobs or whatever it may be.
Okay.
The location is accessible to the highway, so we think there's opportunities there as well.
I went to Landon Middle School, which is a couple lots down, so I'm very excited to see that there's some work being done in this area, because work being done in that area means that it's going to be safer for those middle school students. So I appreciate you guys investing in our community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Just a little more, if I could ask. Again, it's exciting to see the hotel retrofitted. If you could talk a little more about the rent, and how much space that's for, and whether the utilities are included. I mean, what that net cost is going to be to that worker.
Yeah, from a high level, we're working in an existing box. So a lot of the studios are going to be smaller. They're existing hotel rooms where we're adding full-size kitchens and cabinets. So those rents, we are looking at around $540 a month. We have a small portion for utilities that will be on top of that, just for electric and gas. The one-bedroom units are around $750 is where we're looking at right now. Those are 2 units side by side, where we're adding 1 kitchen. So.
And that's the largest of the units? Really, I just wanted to roll it out.
There's a couple 2-bedroom units that are existing that the previous owner converted into apartments, and then there's a couple penthouse units on what we call the tower, and those are already 2 bedrooms. So.
Now, my point really was to draw you out so people could begin to think whether that suited them.
Sure.
You know, dollar-wise and space-wise, having the, will there be other amenities? Some of these redevelopments, you don't need as much in your own apartment because you have living room space and so on.
Right, so we're using the existing restaurant, and we're converting some space into a business center, so we'll have, you know, cubicles and desks that the tenants can use. We'll have a fitness center along with storage, since the units are a little smaller. One thing that we are doing is we're taking out the holodome, just from a functionality standpoint, and the ballroom area. So that's been a hurdle from a construction cost side, is how to understand that aspect of it. And so we've kind of come to the conclusion that it's the best opportunity is just to take it out, and we'll turn it into a courtyard with grass and trees and pergolas and whatnot.
Well, that's good to know, too.
So-
Courtyards are good.
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
And just to answer the question of Councilwoman Nager, I was doing math. In order, the standard is 31% of your income should be housing. So if somebody with roughly $2,200 a month income, which, as we know, is not big, could actually get into an apartment there if the average is 670. All right, seems like there's no other questions. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yep. Thank you for the time.
And then we look forward to seeing the team again next week. If you do have any other questions, please make sure that you follow up with them, follow up with city manager, and ask any questions that you have. We now move to the next item. Just a reminder, it's a legislative agenda, but I'm sure that you've got that.
Item 6C is discussion regarding the city's 2022 legislative priorities for the city's lobbyists to address and monitor during the 2022 legislative session.
Thank you much. Mr. Dameron.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Mayor-elect, members of the governing body, and municipal staff. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about the 2022 legislative session and some of the things that state of Kansas and the city of Topeka might face in the not-so-distant future. I think you have a legislative report from me that highlights the election season that we're about to get back into again. It seems like it never ends. Certainly municipal elections got put into the odd-numbered years, and we have elections in even-numbered years. But 2022, all 125 House members will stand for election, 4 members of Congress, 1 U.S. Senator. The constitutional offices, in particular the governor, is the one that's receiving the most attention at this point in time. And so that flavors a lot of what's going to happen in the legislative process. It's been going on for about the last year as people start anticipating an election next year. One of the biggest issues we're going to see next session is redistricting. We go through that exercise every 10 years. We did that 10 years ago. It ended up in the federal courts, and from memory, I think the court ruled on a Thursday night, and the filing deadline was the following Monday, and so people were scrambling for seats, and we ended up seeing a pretty significant turnover, certainly in the Senate, where conservatives took control of the Kansas Senate back in 2012. We'll see if they can get some redistricting maps that the governor can accept, or if not, there's a potential opportunity to override the vetoes. The Republicans do have 2/3 majorities, both the House and the Senate. But what we're going to see is, because of the way the population has shifted in Kansas, we're going to need probably 1 new senator in Johnson County and 2 or 3 House members. That's going to force districts down and out, moving to the south and moving to the west, which is going to put, quite frankly, Republicans in Republican seats as they have to come up with additional population. And so when you start doing that with legislators, they may not get along that well as they start to see their seats carved up and their areas of favored population go by the wayside. So that will be an interesting challenge for the legislature next year. We've seen a significant amount of federal money come down because of the pandemic. The governor created a committee to kind of administer that process. The legislature interjected themselves into that process as well, and has created 4 committees that the administration has a role in that process, but legislators do as well. And so how the state spends that $1.3 billion that came down will be a part of the political process as well. Certainly cities are seeing that and counties are seeing that with funds that have come down to the local levels as well. One of the bigger issues that we've been working on for about the last, well, several years, but certainly during the legislative session, was the KDHE lab and docking. That process is still not over. During the legislative session, in the omnibus appropriations bill, they inserted language to authorize issuance of bonds and funding for both a new KDHE lab and some kind of renovation of the docking building. They also sent that issue back to the Joint Committee on State Building Construction. They met here in about the last 30 days or so and took that issue up again. They've had it in front of them several times. Their recommendation, primarily led by several senators on that committee, which was approved, was to either take docking down to the ground or take it down to 3 floors, and also to locate the KDHE lab on the KNI property, generally at 21st and Gage. That issue goes to State Finance Council, who has ultimate sign-off on that. It is a recommendation. As we kind of engaged in this process over the last 6 months in particular, there was quite a bit of tension and attention focused on both of those projects. You may recall, going into the 2022 session, there were certain legislators that wanted the KDHE lab subject to an RFP, potentially to go anywhere in the state of Kansas. You had interest on joint building, pushing for both K-State and Wichita State in particular. They were kind of the leading entities being talked about, but KU was talked about, Washburn, et cetera. But those actively engaged were from those two Regents institutions. There's also was talk about whether to take docking and renovate it top to bottom. That got the attention of some of the business community in Topeka, quite frankly, as to what impact that would have on real estate, in particular in the downtown Topeka area. As that issue evolved over the session, there seemed to be kind of a consensus that what made the most sense would be perhaps take docking down to 3 floors, add an additional 3 floors to that, renovate that property, and then the KDHE lab, the state of Kansas did go through an RFP process and looked at a number of sites. They had private developers proposing sites, as well as they looked at some state sites, and came back and said our preference would be either the KNI site or what they called parking lot 4, which is located south of docking, about 2 parking lots down. It's not the one immediately across the street, but the one just further south. And so that was presented back to joint building. And then, again, they came up with the recommendations that they had. Still doesn't seem to be settled. The State Budget Committee, which really didn't have a role in the approval process, but certainly the people on that committee had a role in crafting the budget that led to the proviso in the budget bill to go forward on both the lab and docking. And they had a discussion on that earlier this week, and or late last week, and the chair of the House Appropriations Committee essentially took the position of, where did this come from? What are you people doing with this proposal? This is nothing like what we talked about in the budget hearing of taking docking completely down. So it doesn't appear that issue is resolved. I think the administration had come around to what was proposed to joint building as either option A, which was the full renovation, or option B, which was the 3 and 3 proposal. And I think, not really speaking for the administration, but I think what they had suggested was that could be the most appropriate route to proceed for docking and kind of keep all the interest tamped down, whether it's a business interest in Topeka, the chamber, and Republicans in the legislative process who had expressed concerns that public buildings do compete with the private sector. And so, I mean, it's been kind of a challenging issue that is yet to be resolved. The governor is the one who chairs the State Finance Council and calls that meeting. It's my understanding there are some private discussions going on in that regard, and perhaps when we see some kind of a consensus, you're going to see State Finance Council called to a meeting and come in and talk about docking. Happy to answer questions on that as we continue tonight. I know there were some concerns expressed when Joint Building issued their decision that this was, that the docking was going to be some kind of an event center, and I think that got some people's attention. It's certainly not the kind of an event center that would compete against Stormont Vale Expo Center or public venues. I think the term they were looking for was, there's not a good place in the state capitol for large meetings of state employees, 100, 200 people, not room if legislators or state government wants to have certain kind of presentations, awards, and so forth, that they do in the Capitol now. While you have meetings going on, you don't have very good acoustics and so forth. And so that's the idea of what they've talked about with meeting space and docking. It's not really to be some kind of a public event space. But further discussions are coming on that, I'm sure. I've listed in my report the members of the State Finance Council. It's primarily House and Senate leadership and representatives of the administration and the governor's office. Polk Quincy Viaduct project is proceeding. As certainly the mayor and the members of the council know, they had a recent event with KDOT that talked about that project moving forward. An issue that I think a lot of municipalities are paying attention to, that's coming out of Legislative Post-Audit Committee. During the legislative session, there were concerns expressed in the legislative process that certain nonprofits and governments compete against the private sector, and they are tax subsidized. In particular, the YMCA has been called out. YMCA is a client of mine, for disclosure, by a rather large gym owner that feels it's a challenge to compete against an entity like the YMCA, for-profit gym. They've brought legislation in the past to alter their tax rates, either eliminate their property tax and provide a sales tax exemption, or alternatively take it away from a YMCA and other nonprofits, boys and girls clubs and so forth. So that discussion evolved into what other businesses are unfairly competing against government and nonprofits. And there's legislation to actually provide taxing subsidies to businesses that directly compete. Could be landfill, trash service, event centers, and so forth. That fell by the wayside at the end of the session, but there was a request made to have a legislative post-audit study come back, tell us areas where private sector is forced to compete against governmental entities and nonprofits and so forth. That report is due by January 15th. It's my understanding that the way the post-audit request was made, it was very broad. But post-audit is focusing on three areas in particular: health and fitness, naturally, mental health services, and child care services. So not sure where they came up with those two, certainly the mental health issue, but the documents I've seen indicate that those are the three areas that legislative post-audit is looking at in particular. So that will be an interesting read when it comes out. I've had some conversations with city manager, city attorney about some issues that have been of interest to the city of Topeka in the past. One in particular was abandoned housing. That obviously was a challenge when we had legislation almost a decade ago that made it to the governor's desk and was vetoed. We tried unsuccessfully a couple of times since then. It's an issue that is a great challenge in the legislative process, given the makeup of the legislature, the protection of private property rights. I've done some research on some other states, as we've tried to do in the past, and come up with perhaps some alternatives. Some other states, including Oklahoma, have looked at the kind of an expedited fast-track foreclosure process. I've shared that information with city manager, city attorney's office, said we may want to look at something like that. have a conversation with the county, a conversation with the League of Kansas Municipalities, and see if that's something that would have some appeal. Redemption rights are included in that, at least from what I've seen in other states. So there are protections to property owners. And I know the city's big challenge has not been people, what you can find in sight for their properties that become in a state of disrepair. It's those you cannot find. And that's the ultimate challenge when they just disappear and no one wants to be held responsible for a property. Couple of other issues that have been brought to my attention. I know there was some discussion about the Highcrest Community Center had some issues they were talking about with the Topeka Chamber. I've not been included on those. I was just made aware of that. They may be having discussions with the Greater Topeka Partnership about that. And then there was an issue with law enforcement about firearms, and I had some discussions with city manager, city attorney's office about that. I think they did some due diligence, and there's not anything on the agenda in that regard at this point in time. Highlight some of the issues that the League of Kansas Municipalities has indicated as their priorities for 2022, and we have historically supported them if they're not in areas of conflict. Property taxes, this dark story theory, do you appraise a building that's vacant at a different price than one that is not? In particular, like a Walmart that is closed down versus a Walmart that remains open. That issue is winding its way through the courts. It's moved from the Court of Appeals to the Kansas Supreme Court. That could hold off legislation until the Supreme Court provides some kind of a definitive answer on litigation that is heading to them. Always on the League's issues are annexation, or excuse me, home rule authority. Again, the government competition issue, city-county revenue sharing, possible recodification of the Uniform Traffic Code, and continued support for mental health funding and programs. City of Overland Park brought up 3 different annexation issues that they would like to explore almost unanimously. The people attending that League meeting said, no, we don't want to go back down issue of annexation, certainly in an election year, and just leave that issue alone. So none of those were approved, although Overland Park may bring some of those issues on their own. Several bills that carry over from last session. Senate Bill 87 would essentially eliminate all city-county revenue agreements for the apportionment of sales tax. That issue comes out of the city of Atchison, county of Atchison, and continues to be an issue over there that both the cities and the counties have come in to oppose that legislation. Senate Bill 206 would alter the condemnation process. Cities, KDOT, other utilities who have to use that process from time to time are very concerned about that bill. It was not held for hearings in 2021, but it could come back next year. And then a couple of other kind of rats and cats bills are listed in there. Kansas Association of Counties recently announced their legislative agenda, nothing too far-reaching there. They would like home rule authority like the cities have. That takes a constitutional amendment. I don't see that happening in the near future. They'd probably take it back from cities if they could. Property tax issues, property tax valuation, expansion of Medicaid, mental health reform, prisons, et cetera, is on the agenda for Kansas Association of Counties. Finally, Shawnee County delegation meeting. They have a meeting in the State House every year. Chairman Ken Corbett, Representative Corbett, has called that for Friday, December 10th. The city of Topeka is on the agenda, 9:30 a.m. Likely is streamed online if you want to tune in for that. I know the city manager has that on his calendar, and I hope Amanda does as well. But so that's usually a 15-minute opportunity to spend time with the delegation and talk about what the city's priorities are going to be for the next legislative session. So kind of one of the bright spots going into the 2022 session is state of Kansas seems to be on pretty good financial footing. We're probably not going to see major efforts for any kind of major changes in tax policy. Property tax cuts are always popular in an election year. Unfortunately, that usually hits cities and counties. It's easier for the legislature to say we're going to cut people's taxes, but you all pay for it, not us. So, you know, those issues could come up, but they did pass the Taxpayer Transparency Act here in the last year, which cities and counties are operating under now. And so that's been kind of a major change that I think they're going to talk about next year. And maybe they won't need to pass anything in that regard, at least too far reaching in 2022. So happy to stand for questions and talk about whatever you'd like.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Whitney. Very thorough as usual. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Quick question for you. Could you give a brief explanation, because I have not had time to really read the last couple of days, what the process is and what the possibilities are of the food tax that the governor has spoken about, and kind of how that works? I'm going to make you save me some research.
You know, it's been fascinating for people that pay attention to politics and what we've seen without kind of getting too much into the gubernatorial politics. We now have, obviously, Attorney General Derek Schmidt, who's not likely to have a serious primary challenger, being seen as, you know, the person likely to face, obviously, our incumbent governor, Laura Kelly. The issue of trying to reduce sales tax on food has been around for years, but it's expensive. It's a big chunk. The state of Kansas is among the highest if you consider state and local taxes for food. So the governor has talked about trying to do that. I think she's wanted to see the state get on more firm financial footing as she came into her election in 2018. We didn't exactly have a lot of extra cash around. The state's actually increased its sales tax over the last decade slightly to try to manage the budget. But clearly the governor wanted to get to that point of somehow trying to reduce sales tax on food. You know, interestingly enough, the Attorney General came out about 3 days ago and said, I call upon the Kansas legislature to eliminate the sales tax on food in 2022. And that, I mean, it's politics. It starts putting people into a box. So the governor would like to be there, would like to bring that in her plan. Attorney General Derek Schmidt has essentially given Republicans permission to push that legislation himself, and so they're both kind of competing for who gets credit with that. The governor hasn't indicated how she would pay for it. At least my read suggests, based upon existing funds, and that the state will have the ability to absorb that loss of revenue. You know, in the past, they were looking at trade-offs. We're going to eliminate certain sales tax exemptions and try to buy down the rate and use that to pay down the sales tax on food or come up with some kind of a differential there. So it's going to be a fascinating discussion of how they get into that. You know, it's kind of similar to that discussion also has been the Attorney General has joined with other attorneys general on litigation against the Biden administration on the mandate for vaccinations if you have through OSHA, if you have a company employing 100 people or more. He was criticized by the governor, who has also criticized the Biden administration on that. And so that's created an interesting dynamic. A special committee today has recommended that the legislature essentially petition the governor to call a special session to provide some kind of protections to employees and employers on that mandate issue. The process is if the governor does not call a special session, a 2/3 majority of the House and the Senate can petition for a special session, and that may be the process they have to go through. I think they're going to have further discussion on that on Friday. So that's certainly creating a lot of tension in the State House as well.
Thank you. thank you for that. I'm convinced it's because both my boys are out of the house now, so the grocery tax gets eliminated.
There you go.
Doesn't seem like there's other questions, but there is a person, Councilman Duncan. I was going to say, there's a person signed up for public comment. So we'll do the public comment first, and then we'll go back to Councilman Duncan. Mr. Ledbetter, you had comments on this item?
Yes. Brief. Thanks for the report. Governing body, one of the things that I've watched over the years when we come to these items is we seem to have a very wide net, and I don't know how much we catch. And so the only thing I'm just asking you as a board to do is tell the people what you think you should have, and I'm sure I'll support that. One thing that we do need to keep here is that KDHE lab, and wherever it goes, it's got to stay in the corporate limits of Topeka. And I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but I know there's a statute that talks about all of our departments are supposed to be located in Topeka, but they took, one of them a few years ago, and they ignored that. So I don't want to ignore anything at the legislature ever, whether it's highways or anything that we need. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan, you had questions for Mr. Dameron.
Yeah, and maybe, first thing is I'll piggyback off Councilman Lester there. I think we should probably add that the city of Topeka, my personal position is we, the city of Topeka, should support a reduction in the food sales tax. We don't have to give guidance as to what it should be, whether they choose to go 1% or all the way. So I'll just throw that out there. We can debate it later, but we're the capital city. There's several issues through the years, whether it's at the federal or state level, where if you ask a legislator to a person, do you support it, they say yes, and yet somehow it can never hit the floor and get a full vote passed out. And food sales tax for several years seems to be one of those that everybody supports, but magically they collectively can't get something passed out. So I think if we could add our voice as the capital city to that charge, that hey, it's an election year, a lot of you want it, let's do it. That's something that we could easily do. This is just not a tonight conversation, probably, I guess a bigger concern's not the right word. Some of these issues here are recaps of the issue, but they don't clarify our position. And these issues are coming. What is our position on the issue of the Genesis Health Club issue, right? I think we sort of know, and we're following the league. On the abandoned housing issue, I guess my question would be, yes, we've been active in that, but is there a pending bill? Are we planning to actually introduce a bill to try to move that forward? I'm glad we support it, but if we're not actively introducing legislation to do it, we're not getting anywhere in terms of actually moving that process forward. So I think at some point, and the reality is, we'll have to we will have an interim city manager at that time in that process, but I think some of us need to sit down at some point and dig through some of these to say, these may be our positions, let's bring them back and get them definitive, because when these things happen fast and furious at the Capitol and they have 2-3 day turnarounds, we don't have a meeting, and we can't expect Whitney to just run in here and say, I knew this issue was coming, I need a more clear position. And so I just feel we need to coordinate that as we move forward a little bit, so we're ready to have definitive answers. My last thing is, and I guess I hate, maybe it's not Chief Wheelis, I have a question. One of the issues on here relates to the Topeka Police Department would like to review KSA in regard to what can be done with firearms used in a crime. My question is, again, is there somebody pushing legislation we want to get behind? Or is the city of Topeka, our police department, asking us to generate legislation to make that change?
I would offer a comment before. When I put this report together, it was like to meet your deadline 2 weeks ago,
Right. No,
2.5
right.
weeks ago. And so at that point in time, that was an issue that was suggested might come up from the city police department. They had an interest in that issue. In discussing that with the city attorney, I said we may want to visit with former Chief Klomp, who heads up the 3 law enforcement lobbying organizations, the police chiefs and the Fraternal Order of Police and so forth, as well as county district attorneys, and I think that was done. And I think the consensus was this may not be, 2022 may not be the year to bring that up. That was the information then that I received, I think, this morning. So that's how it got into my report.
Okay.
And Councilman Duncan, it just seems like this may be a good time for us to maybe consider, I'm going to say a really bad word right now, so bear with me. I think that it'd be really powerful if this group would have a legislative committee, so that as these are items that are pressing for us to work at the state, maybe have a standing committee that meets for example, every December or every January before the legislature comes in, and then hashes out something, brings it to this governing body as the potential position of the body, so that then the body can have exactly what you're saying, that position that has been discussed at a committee level that is being brought to the governing body, and then we have a way of pushing things forward.
I would argue we have that committee in our policy committee without having to recreate that, and I think that's something that seems like a place that those agendas fit easily into. So I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
So that was it. And I'm not, again, we can't solve all these tonight. I just know that, and it's to help Whitney, because I'm in that building too, and Whitney and I both. Some guys are just like, oh my gosh, they weren't even talking about this yesterday, and today it's happening, and oops, we should have had a conversation. I want to make sure Whitney's ready to do what we want him to do. So thank you.
If I could follow up on Councilman
Mayor?
Duncan's.
Yes, Councilwoman, just a second. We have Councilwoman Hiller, and then I'll call on you.
Thank you.
On Councilman Duncan's question about the abandoned housing, I know in 2021, this governing body said if we have an opportunity to revisit that issue in the process, we would like to do that. It's kind of the fact of the matter is, as you get further down to the people where the city council is and you're dealing with the problems of abandoned housing, it doesn't resonate at that same level of heat in the State House. And they're more conservative as a body, quite frankly, than the major cities are that have to deal with these issues in Kansas. Just speaking frankly, City of Wichita has these challenges, City of Lawrence, City of Topeka, City of Kansas City, Kansas, City of Overland Park. And it's one thing to talk about an abandoned housing bill. It's another thing to what does that look like that we can take into the Kansas legislature as it is made up, defend that and advance it. And that's been the challenge that we've had of trying to get our arms around how to protect private property interest, yet protect neighborhoods and cities and the people that have to live next door to those properties. And that's been the challenge. I'm sorry.
No worries. Councilwoman Hiller to be followed by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you. I appreciate those comments and those of my colleagues. Just to I brought a list with me, but the abandoned housing and the idea of just addressing issues. Somewhere, I was looking for it not long ago, but I would swear that we have a resolution or policy somewhere that says we're supposed to have work on our legislative agenda in October. And it strays until this late regularly. And I think if we could have a meeting of the minds of this body or with the city manager and maybe Whitney's advice as well, and Amanda's, she's been at the league. For instance, the League of Kansas Municipalities has a legislative meeting the third week of every August to get heads together. And especially if we have issues that are kind of city-oriented, to be able to run them through the league and get support of our colleagues around the state before it even starts to move forward could be a better place to get started with some of the issues that have been hard to push. And so I really hope we would have an August, October, and whether we have a special committee just for that, I don't know that it needs to be a standing committee, but we do need to have also a tradition of bringing issues back to us before a public position on the behalf of the city is stated. And so kind of going through the list, for instance, for docking, some of these issues on the list, I think we need to revisit as a council and talk about the issues and make sure that, for instance, docking, the position of the city got changed and we weren't consulted first. We're at a point where maybe we should get our heads together again and also get heads together with the Greater Topeka Partnership so that we don't, as a body, find out what official positions we supposedly are part of in the paper or on the evening news. So, on docking, I do think we should visit further about strategy and what people know, both on the building to refresh or change the position that we took before, as well as the KDHE site. I'm glad to hear the conversations are still going. I mean, we made a commitment to the governor back in April that we would back her, and then things changed, and I just don't want that to happen again. On the sales tax issue, I had a constituent that called me about it, and I do think as part of our due diligence on that, we should run the numbers on what taking sales tax off food would mean to revenue for us, just so that we know that as part of our conversation.
The proposal was not to take sales tax from the local level, so that would continue on, or that would be certainly a policy.
Well, it would be,
Decision
but
time.
sales tax at the state level, we get some back
Sure.
from that. So we've just looked at the state, what that would mean. I'm not sure whether this one is something to direct to you or to city manager, but with the state, with the money coming to the state, the ARPA money and other infrastructure money, if part of our legislative agenda should be making sure that we're on the front lines to make sure that we optimize how much money we can compete for out of the state funds, as well as whatever we get directly. Sometimes what's happened is that money that comes to the state gets prioritized for rural, and in some cases, cities can't even compete for it. And so just to make sure we get as much as we can on the urban side, I'd like to see that. What we've got coming up is both broadband as well as other federal ARPA money. Broadband came up recently in the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting, and so on. This is kind of a small, well, related to that, if there's any way that some of this new money that's either coming to the state or otherwise could help cover our 20 million share in Polk Quincy Viaduct, that would help us balance some things out too. I'd just like to make sure any of our big ticket items are always out on the table to see if we can come up with other money. On a much smaller scale, one of the items that's coming through the recommendations regarding change our culture of property maintenance is somehow making sure that the state is taking care of its right-of-way maintenance, particularly in the capital city, so that we're not even having a conversation about it. That has historically been problematic, or at least in recent years. So I would suggest that we consider getting that on either an administrative advocacy agenda or it's going to come through that committee recommendation anyway, but if it needs to be legislative, certainly have that included. Correspondingly, on the abandoned housing, I think getting heads together about it again, and if the proposal that was run before just isn't viable, then maybe we want to be concerned about it, but not keep running that same old legislation. Again, with the report that's coming out of Public Health and Safety for initiatives, it looks like we will be, city manager's been assisting with this too, pursuing the consultation from a national level consultant who has worked on these issues extensively before. And so we might not have a recommendation ready in time for this year's legislative session, but by midsummer we should, so that we'll have one for next year. So just wanted to mention that. The dark store theory, I appreciate, we have certainly run into that in terms of vacant properties that we have where the appraisal has been knocked down to zero on the building. And so all that they're being taxed for is the land. And what we've seen with some of those cases is that getting rid of that land, either fixing the building or getting rid of it so that they don't owe property taxes. You lose that lever if the property taxes get dropped off. It's like we're doing them a favor to sit there with it empty and doing nothing. So I do think that was, for our experience, would be one to pay attention to. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Perfectly.
Okay, just wanted to say that I agree with the number of comments that both Councilwoman Hiller and Councilman Duncan are saying. Also, I think that we need to utilize the services of our lobbyists to the full extent as possible. What that means to me as well is not only picking up on, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly, ma'am.
Okay, on Councilwoman Hiller's idea about involving the League of Municipalities, but I also think that what we need to consider is utilizing the relationship we have with the Shawnee County delegation to move forward, whatever it is that we need to move forward, especially I'm thinking in the way of vacant structures. The other thing is that what our lobbyist is referring to with that kind of mentality of once you get into that realm, into that bubble of the legislature, it becomes far removed from the cities, from the towns, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe that's why it's important we as elected officials, when possible, should go up there and testify, even developing coalitions of testimony with like-minded cities that are facing the same thing, so that these legislators that are sitting in this silo that is the State House can really start getting that information to them in the way of testimonials at those committee hearings. And so I would strongly encourage that as well, and to work with our lobbyist in any way to make that happen. Additionally, I also sent an email to city manager about wondering what our percentage, what type of funds we were receiving in from sales tax for food, so that we would be ready as this dialogue starts to move forth, I would imagine pretty aggressively in the State House and beyond, so that we're ready as council people to deal with any questions that the public may have of us on the city side, for, how much we are receiving, what's a yay or nay for, reducing or cutting that, et cetera. So the bottom line is that we are prepared. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for the discussion. Oh, Councilman Lesser.
I do have one question, actually, for Karen. You referred to a couple times that we came out in support of the governor and her plan on the docking building. And I don't know exactly what you're talking about right there. If you could, because I never came out in support of her plan, so I'm curious what we're talking about there.
Well, it's a good question, and one maybe we need to talk about further. That came from some advocacy that I was involved with DTI and the partnership in just opening up the issue of docking back in April. There were meetings at the State House and eventually with the governor. One of the things that happened then was that we asked her what her preference was, and her preference at the time was to save the entire building. And so we had conversations about what that meant and how it would work, and there were, it did change the way the statement of position came from the partnership and DTI. There had been mixed messages coming from them in the past. City manager and others from the city were involved in those meetings as well.
And I would agree with that. I think making the comment that we, as in the city as a body, came in support of what the governor's plan was, though, is disingenuous and not accurate. I was not in those meetings. I was in some other meetings. I don't know who else was in other meetings, but I think we need to not make the statement that comes off as this body said we supported exactly what the governor's plan was, because that's just not accurate.
Point taken. I think we need to talk about it better in the future. Thank you.
City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably the key point is that with the delegation, the Shawnee County delegation meeting happening on December 9th, based on previous visits to the Shawnee County delegation, we need to determine what our legislative priorities are prior to that meeting, because they want to receive them then. So need to work with the various, see if we're going to talk at Policy and Finance Committee, whether we're bringing that back here on December 6th to have a decision on that. Obviously, there's work that I can do with Mr. Dameron and others as it relates to developing what our policy or our priorities are, but working towards at least on the December 6th meeting, bringing you something to debate, vote, et cetera, as it relates to docking and the other legislative priorities that have been, issues that have been discussed tonight. We need to establish what those priorities are, and maybe our list is only 4 or 5 items, and that's what we agree on, and then address it from there. Some of the items we may say we are watching or monitoring, but these are our priorities. So sometime between now and then, through whatever process, we need to be ready for the December 9th meeting with our priorities.
Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Just one final thought. I did want to say that the Shawnee County delegation was very much engaged, in particular on docking and K&I. And Chairman Corbett called the meeting during the session, which some of you attended, I know, but had a strong turnout from the delegation and people of interest, the partnership and the like, and really focused on supporting K&I staying in Topeka, and that ultimately made it into the legislation. So I think that issue has been resolved one way or the other, whether it's parking lot for or K&I, and then also supporting docking, and that ultimately made it into the budget. And I know Representative Alcala is on joint building and was very helpful in that regard in running that bridge between joint building and the delegation, and really all of them were paying attention to the issue and being helpful. So thank you very much tonight.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Duncan.
So for the policy team over there, there are actually 2 other issues we just kind of need to approve at this point and tweak a little bit. I know we're going to do a quickie thing in a week or so, but I think what I will do is just announce now, we will try to see if we can have a meeting that week after Thanksgiving. Before the meeting, I'll have Liz put something together, and we can touch on this, get that other stuff wrapped up by the end of the year, and have something back to the council that first meeting in December. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this point in time, we move on to the public comment. We have 2 individuals signed up for public comment. The first one is Ms. Sandra Lassiter.
All right, I'm going to try this again, and that is good evening.
Good evening.
All right, I see. That's good. I thought we were competing with Chicago tonight, but I thought, let me just say what I have to say. I don't want to dance and sing. But anyway, it's good to have everybody back tonight, and looks like you're in pretty good health, and there are just so many things that have happened suddenly in this last week for me. It just once again causes me to have to be a voice, and that's not because I want to be. My disclaimer is I do not want to apply or even want to think about being the city manager. But I do want to address the fact that, thank you, city manager, for all you've done, and hope you've been delighted in being in Topeka and for all the healthy experiences that you've had.
Yes.
I am very concerned, as many others are, that we look inward, and I realize there's a statement that's been made on more than one occasion that a man does not receive honor in his own country. But I do think that there is possibly somebody, they might not be the sharpest knife in the pantry, but they may be pretty sharp, and they're in Topeka, Kansas. And I believe that Topeka spends quite a bit of money, and I think we're the center of the US of A, and I think that there is somebody in this city that we might be able to secure for this position that's coming up. I am very concerned that we go outside, and I know we do the national search and all of that, and there are great minds out there, and there are great people that we've brought in, but I do believe there's somebody in this city that can fill that position. Those persons, I'm sure, would realize that we have the entitled people, we have the people that can buy their way, we have the oligarchy, we have the people that beg their way, we have the persons that we understand can have a balance and know something about every area, every component, every concern in this city. And those are homegrown, been here at least 5 or more years, not as much as me, 70-some years, but they've been here a while. And I just think that I would like to see you consider that, because this board maybe have the final say, but there are those of us in this community that will have a lot to say and a lot of comments about the upcoming city manager. Thank you very much. Be blessed.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank
Mr. Carter, you're next.
It's been over a year since we have postponed the session in regards to police reform and created a committee to address those issues. Our chief of staff, which at the time was a chief of police, had made recommendations. The governor had offered recommendations, and again, it's been over a year, and it hasn't been addressed to the community. We're just wondering what's going on. Are any of these recommendations being considered? And just like, where are we going with this? Also, in regards to the city manager's position, it's my understanding that the chief of staff would be next in line, considered as the acting city manager. And I say we, as the community, feel like that hiring process was unjust and unfair due to the fact that it was posted and taken down before its end date, which we don't know if all the, didn't give folks enough time to actually apply, and we don't know if, you know, we missed a qualified person for that role or not. And just feel like with the state that this community is in, with the volatile issues and et cetera, that, and the lack of steps and action steps taken forward, that this city is in a crisis, and we definitely need someone that is not only qualified for the position, but also has the experience. Like, we shouldn't be experimenting or just giving someone a chance, like not in this position that we're in. And with the hiring, the chief position, like, I feel like there has been a total lack of transparency. I'm almost certain that the candidates got more than a 24-hour notice to be here in 24 hours. And it's my assumption that, I mean, it's my understanding that they're going to be here tomorrow for an interviewing process. It's the transparency in the whole entire process. Like, what was the process for these 4 candidates being chosen? And like, were there more? Are this the most qualified, or is this just the 4 chosen for us to actually interview and actually speak to for the role? The governing body speaks about partnership with the community. And there's been individual relationships made, and like, those words have some feeling to it, but when actions are happening this way, it's just like, we're gonna need some actions with this too, like, just information on what the policies are when things are happening with more than a 24-hour notice. I don't know if that's the same notice
You still have a minute, PJ.
I don't know if that's the same notice that y'all have, but like, that's just like, folks have kids, jobs, and et cetera, and like, would like to plan for things just like you guys are planning for the meetings that y'all have to do with the legislators and whatnot. So that's my position on that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for speaking. At this point in time, we move on to the announcements. We start with the clerk.
For the November 16th preliminary agenda, I will review the agenda without the changes and make the updates from the meeting this evening, whatever will be transferred over. Currently, we have 2 proclamations for next week. There are 4 board appointments, 2 presentations. One is the ETC Citizen Satisfaction Survey and a winter operations update. Routine items on the consent agenda. Action items are the flywheel fair lawn item, ordinance, the Citizen Advisory Council, resolution, the 2022 Topeka Dreams, grant awardees, and set the public hearing for the 2021 budget amendments. And the non-action items are discussion of bird scooters and the ARPA funding project list discussion. And that is it.
All right, we start with City Manager.
Thank you. The only item I have is that the public is invited to an open house tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at the Holiday Office Building of the city to meet the police chief candidates if they're interested. So if they're interested in coming and meeting them, the public is invited to attend. That's all.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All I wanted to do is thank our veterans. This Thursday is Veterans Day, and making that ultimate sacrifice, putting your well-being, your life, and your goals on hold in such a way that you would serve your country is something that is very admirable. And I very much appreciate those who have served, those who are serving, and those who serve alongside their family members. And I just hope that everyone finds that time in their day to really reach out and share that gratitude. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Dobler.
No comments, Mayor.
Councilman Duncan.
I need a mic, that's my announcement. So in my life, I've lost several elections dating back to middle school. Nobody wanted me on student council at the time. Came close in high school. I haven't lost as many as Abe Lincoln. Obviously, we had an election. Winners have all been congratulated. But I do think it's appropriate to congratulate those who didn't win. It is a tough thing to run for these offices. You are putting yourself out there. You are committing a lot of time. In many cases, you have no clue what you're doing, but you know you want to support the community, and that deserves kudos also for that effort. And so, while I already congratulated the winners, I did want to thank all those who ran this past election. Hope it doesn't deter them for the future. It's okay to lose a few times. Eventually, you may win that election. So I just wanted to say that tonight, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too would like to thank my constituents for voting me back another term. That's very humbling. I want to also congratulate Mr. Gregory Bland Jr., who ran against me. We both ran a nice, clean campaign. He called me that the night of. He and I are going to sit down, talk, because I know that I can learn from him, no different than I did the last time, and that I learned from Ms. Charay, who ran against me as well. I will say, though, I am troubled. I am troubled by some of the flyers that went out in a couple of the other districts. That I venture to guess came from the same person, because I know for a fact there's no one with any more character than Miss Ortiz over there, and that she had nothing to do with the one that came out in her district and then the one that came out in Mr. Clark falsely. And that's very troublesome to me. And I'll flat out say I wish the media would have came out with the same veracity before the fact as they did come out after the fact in condemning the false information that went out, because I think it was I just don't, right's right, wrong's wrong, and I struggled with whether I was going to say anything about that, but that's just crap, just is. We're better than that, and I had to say that for Mike, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I too want to congratulate everyone, all of my colleagues that won, and also kudos and thanks to all of the candidates. I'm glad that Councilman Lesser's meeting with his opponent, but we've discovered some really great talent that can move into boards and can start to move up through the elections, and so. And kudos to everybody who voted, who took the time. This was a quiet, weird campaign season, and so I was pleased to see the results, but also the action and the efforts that people made. I don't know about everybody else, but somehow, I don't know if it's a phase of the moon, but I'm just swamped with citizen things right now, too. And so I'm grateful to be here because I've been around and to have all of you as well when we have mutual things that come up that we can share or just go to a higher level to problem solve on. It's hard work. We know it. And I think our constituents seem to realize that as well, and that's nice. Wanted to give kudos out to Mayor-elect, and Commissioner Cook for their comments this morning at the State of the Community Address. It was very well attended in the new event space that's on the first floor of what used to be the Bank America Tower. Ken Schmanke has done a wonderful job. He said that they had 3 major events in that building today with mid-floor, the first floor space, mid-floor space, and the new top of the tower, the renovated top of the tower. That's pretty incredible and pretty exciting for business, for downtown. And again, back to the event, the partnership and a variety of private businesses sponsored that. It was really nice, really, really good. And with that, that's it.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. Councilwoman?
I'm sorry. Just wanted to announce, thank you, Mayor, that there was a wonderful initiative that had a press conference today at CRC Lundgren that was put on by Topeka Habitat for Humanity along with Topeka Community Foundation, introducing their House to Home program. And I definitely encourage folks in the community to look up Habitat for Humanity and get more information on it. It is an extraordinary program that will be assisting contract for deed purchasers in becoming title holders to their home. As we know, contract for deed is a relatively unregulated method for those that are desperate to buy a house. Oftentimes they are LMI folks of color, et cetera, and oftentimes they are taken advantage of, and yes, that happens here in Topeka. And so with the launching of this program, Topeka Habitat for Humanity, along with Topeka Community Foundation, is going to be inserting themselves within this realm to bring justice and equity, which is part of the reality that came out of our affordable housing study was the need for more equity in housing. So just a huge shout out to them. Also, I just wanted to be really honest because I think difficult things that happen can at times help other folks. I'm in quarantine right now. Never would I think I'd be in quarantine. My grandkids are, et cetera, because my spouse came down with a breakthrough case of COVID. It is very mild, but we were extremely taken off guard by it. We wear masks, almost 100% every time we go out of the house, and yet here we are. So I just wanted to let folks know because I know that people have been vaccinated and they're much safer now that, they have the booster. But I'm just telling you, we are still in that state of COVID and our numbers are still showing it in Topeka. And now you have, an additional council member whose family is being impacted by it. So that's it. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been outside today. I too, Mike, am meeting with Regina to have a big girl talk. Campaigning is tough. You never know what you're going to hit. You never know what's going to be blamed on you, but what you do in the dark will come to light, and I truly believe that within my heart. So I'm tough-skinned. My daddy didn't raise no punk, so I'm tough. It's all good. It's all good. And I let her know District 3 needs both of us, so it's all good. I do want to say thank you to the veterans, to all of those that have served. I can't believe Mr. Emerson have served, but all those that have served, thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. Padilla down there, thank you. I seen your little service picture there, so I know you serve, but, and I do try to, when I see a service person, just to tell them, a serviceman or woman, thank you for your service. I kind of want to say thank you to Habitat. I want to say thank you, Habitat. And I have a little story to tell. As I was campaigning, I met a lady that was basically locked in her house. And she couldn't get out. She was in a wheelchair. And when I went to, as you go door to door, you see a lot. You learn a lot. She told me she couldn't get out to go to her appointments. She was just stuck in there. She tried with the city, and because she's in the floodplain, we could not help her. That's just it, bottom line. So I called Habitat, and they said, well, give her this application, and they worked with independent living, and we got her a ramp. And 2 weeks later, I went over there, helped her fill out the application, got it turned in, and she's got a beautiful ramp. That lady called me praising God and thanking me. But it's just a miracle. We can't just say no and stop there. We've got to work partnership and helping. Habitat is really doing that. Janice is doing a great job over there to see how far she can go. And the landlord didn't put one in, but she got a ramp, and now Miss Scott can go out and just sit on her sidewalk and breathe some fresh air. So that's what Topeka's all about. I too want to thank my constituents for another decade, and it's been kind of difficult. I was on the fence, and Padilla kind of pushed me off the fence on one side, so I'm getting old for this. I'm getting really, really too old for this. So let's make it another good 4 years. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mayor. Guess I want to echo what everyone else has said. I was really happy with the outcome of the election, that all of you here that are incumbents are going to be here, back here next year, with the exception of the mayor who didn't run. But, all you guys really care, and I know, I'm sure there's a lot of cynicism in the city, right? That, they're, a bunch of gas bags and set up there, but I really have, and maybe we are at times. But, all you guys really care and you work your butts off, so I really appreciate it. I look forward to serving with you guys again. I did want to congratulate we had the state cross-country championships for 5A and 6A in Wichita last Saturday, and I was down there with Shawnee Heights, but saw Worshman Rural and Seaman and Topeka West there, and everyone did great. Shawnee Heights, I want to congratulate them. They took kind of what would be the city crown, I guess, by getting a 7th place finish in the 5A. And then today, Corey Sutton and Jackson Escabel and my son Andrew were named to the first team all-city. So they did a great job. Andrew had heart surgery in June, so to see him come back and be able to do that was amazing. But Corey, by the way, broke a 30-year record. I think 14, he did the 5K in 15 minutes, which I think beat my record by like 2 or 3 seconds. A 30-year record he did, and so Andrew, obviously just like me, very tall and, well, tall.
Full body?
Yes, not full body yet. But I do tell him, and Jeremiah as well, these kids, I cannot believe the stuff they eat. Before Jeremiah goes and runs sprints, Twinkies, Ho-Hos, everything bad for you. He runs on sugar.
Carb load.
Is what. But I tell him, it'll catch up with you guys, trust me. You can do anything if you're going to run 8 or 10 miles a day, but, anyway. So, but it was a great, fantastic week for Topeka to see so many young people down there over the weekend from Topeka. It was well represented, so we had a great time.
Mayor-elect.
Mayor-elect.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to follow up just a little bit on what Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala talked about. She's right to talk about this new house-to-home program. I was there for the press conference and got to visit with Marcia Pope because I've been able to serve on that impact committee. And what it does is groundbreaking. This is the only program like it in the entire country. And again, Topeka is on the cutting edge, and people just don't know how hard other Topekans are working for them to help them in their situation. And congratulations to the effort that's being done to help LMI people and others. It's just something that's really rewarding. And we talked a little bit about it this morning at the State of the Community, is that it's not our organization, it's our people, and how each of us steps up and does their part in their own area of concern and passion. So I think I also congratulate Valdivia Alcala on her garden. I got a tour out there this morning when I was out there at Lundgren. That's quite a garden. I don't know about the sweet potatoes. They look like they're aliens or something. I don't know what they use, but I got a good tour of that place. But it's rewarding to see that school being used the way it is. I know that I think they have room for 10 clients, and they already have 7 clients there filling up that building and using it in every way possible for the community. So I think that's a great thing. I was able to be at the Veterans Parade, met with General Rieger, and he was the Grand Marshal. That was, I think, the best Veterans Day parade I've seen in Topeka in a long time. Perfect weather. And then they had a flyover that came by 3 different times. So if you missed it the first time, you got a couple more chances to see it. But it was an excellent parade. Great turnout by the community. Kansas Avenue and 10th Street was just packed with people. So like you were saying, I appreciate every veteran. And the thing we have to keep in mind about that is that by just appreciating them, it's not enough. We have to work for them. We have to work hard for them and help them in every way we can in this community. So I was glad to be a part of that. The last thing that I want to bring up is my congratulations again, like my colleagues did, to the people who took the time to put themselves out there and run for office. I think it's a commitment that, unless you've done it, you really don't realize how much it takes to get it done. And I congratulate my colleagues who are returning, and welcome the new council member for District 5 that's going to take my seat. And I think we have a bright future ahead of us because of all the work the Mayor de la Isla and this sitting body has done for the last, well, 8 years, because the mayor's here in District 5 and then came on as the mayor. So we're in good shape, and I think that I really want to encourage people to keep involved. If you didn't win, that doesn't mean that you can step away. You expressed an interest, so step up on something that you're impassioned about. And I offered that opportunity to Mr. Cangiani. I said, get a hold of me when you're ready. When you find that one thing or a couple things you really want to work on, come and visit with me and see if I can help you get those things addressed. So it's a tough time, but at the same time, at the end, you take a breath of relief and you get re-energized, because I'm ready to come back to work and do council work instead of campaigning. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Amen. I just echoing those comments, to all of you who ran, it's taxing. And I think that the thing that we don't often talk about is that it's not just taxing for us. It's taxing for our families. I was at Mike's watch party, and no secret, it was in the newspaper. But it was heartwarming, not just to see how Ronnie was more nervous than Mike through the process, but also to see Mike's mom and his kids, and just imagine the anxiety day in and day out, which is the importance of clean races, right? Because you don't know what somebody's going to say that's going to get to your kids. You don't know how what you're going to say is going to get to the person running, and how they're going to have to deal and respond to their kids or their community that has been supporting them about those things. Clean races are so important. I really applaud the mayor's race. Both Leo and Mike were class acts, and it was just worthy of noting that you don't have to get dirty to win an election. Topeka is the home of proving that. So thank you guys for running. Thank you to those who lost, or I wouldn't even say lost. Thank you to those who now win the opportunity of getting involved in a different way. Thank you to those who won the insight of understanding a little bit better what your community needs. And like Mike said and everybody has said, don't stop. Don't stop. Keep getting engaged. Keep coming back. We need you. We need you absolutely. And then as we were talking about the Veterans Day, just remember that this is the home of the 190th. Our coyotes are our people. They're our airmen. So to all of our coyotes, whom I adore, just know that we're proud of you and that we are proud to be your home. Happy Veterans Day. Make sure that you not only celebrate their sacrifices on the 11th, but that you do so every day. With that, we have 2 executive sessions. The first one will have the parameters read by our city attorney, and yes, we will have a 5-minute recess before we engage in them. City attorney.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss matters related to an individual employee pursuant to KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chambers. The following staff may be needed to assist the governing body in its deliberations: City Manager Trout, HR Director Russell, and City Attorney Stanley.
We have the parameters. What is the pleasure of the governing body? We have a motion by Councilman Emerson. We have a second by Councilman Dobler. And although Councilwoman Ortiz also spoke, that being said, for this one, because it's easier this way, all opposed? Seeing no opposition to the executive session, we will enter into the executive session after a short recess. I will call Christina. All right, we have exited the executive session. No action has been taken. However, we must re-enter the same executive session under the same parameters. To not exceed 15 minutes. So do we have a motion? So we have a motion by the mayor-elect, seconded by Councilwoman Ortiz. All opposed? Seeing no opposition, we re-enter the executive session.
Okay, we'll see how that goes.
The executive session has concluded. At this point in time, there was no action taken during the executive session. However, because there was no action taken in the executive session, I think that the mayor-elect has a motion that he would like to make.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to make a motion. I move to direct the city attorney to negotiate and execute a separation and 6-month consulting agreement with City Manager Trout to facilitate the transition.
Do we have a second? Thank you so much, Councilwoman Nager. Additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting. Yes, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you, I'm sorry, can you explain to the public what we're doing?
Absolutely.
You know, so
Pardon
that
me.
we're clear, so that everybody understands Mr. Trout sending his resignation. I'll let you do.
Correct, absolutely. So just this week or last week, I don't remember because it's just been blurry, City Manager Trout announced that he was, after spending some time with his grandkiddos on the East Coast, that he was going to resign because he felt like this was the right move for his family at the time. And although the city of Topeka is extremely sad to see him go, it is the duty of the governing body to determine what the parameters, if we're going to even accept his resignation. So at this point in time, as you heard, there is going to be a contract negotiation for city manager to be retained under contract for a little while. And the city attorney has been granted the permission to go ahead and try to work with city manager on a contract so that we can have some help in the transition period. Thank you. Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments, At this point in time, we'll proceed with voting. So I think that this one is one that everybody would be okay to say anybody opposed, because it's a lot quicker. Anybody opposed to the action recommended in the motion by the mayor-elect? See, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala abstains. Any other abstentions or noes? Okay, seeing no other, it does carry on with 9 votes. So at this point in time, there are no other items in front of the governing body, and we are adjourned.